Then I said, wrecked him, damn near killed him.
Now,
Hard to believe.
this was a priest that you said this to?
What's the there's bologna, but then there's the expensive bologna that starts with an M. What's it called?
I don't know what you're talking about. It starts with an M?
Yeah.
Or is it to lead into a joke?
No. This is a legitimate
You're
question.
asking us what the fancy part of something is? You're asking us.
That's
Like,
well, Ron
this is
may
not
would
the,
know better than.
Oh, what is it called?
Um,
Oh, and I gotta look at this.
I don't know. My culinary
Oh.
taste run to the varsity in the Atlanta, so I can't tell
There you
the
go.
other stuff.
Oh yeah, mortadella. Thank you. Okay.
never heard of it.
Yeah. Well,
And not
That's
head
because,
cheese, huh?
Mortadella.
yeah. I've been going through.
If you can't buy it at the Piggly Wiggly, then I mean, what's the point?
I've been going through my father's logbook again, and it's been really interesting. I think it's so fascinating to it's because we're pilots, we have the decoder system for this. You know, if anybody else picks this up randomly, they can't necessarily pick up a whole lot about it. But I can see these things that mean something, you know, really to me, you know, where it's like, oh, I can see that just even the frequency of flying or now flying, you know, obviously he had access to this plane or, you know, I don't know, just various things about his life at the time that I didn't really realize. But, and then the things he chose to note, you know, there's one in here that just says like nice clouds.
There you go.
So I thought that was good.
It might be code though, you know.
Right. Oh yeah. Right. For VFR, yeah. And I don't know. It's such an interesting thing. He was flying out of NC 67, which is this little grass strip at the foot of the mountain right by Asheville. And
Is it still open?
it is. Well, as far as I can tell, I looked at it I've flown over it before and looked down. I couldn't tell.
Six Oaks Air Park.
Yeah, I'm like, where did the planes come from? Because when you're looking at it on Google Earth, I'm just thinking, they just have them in a barn or what's going on? But neat to kind of see that stuff.
It's
Do we
very
need to tell you where planes come from?
We didn't have that.
When a daddy plane loves a mommy plane very much. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, never mind.
This is going to be a banger episode.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. And Rich, you did not miss it by milliseconds because Wendy was here about 10 minutes before you were. So
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
Oh,
Hello,
I know what I was
Wendy.
going to say. Going through your dad's pilot with his logbook, and I'm not saying that this is an invasion, but you might as well be reading somebody's diary,
Right.
If you know what to look for.
Yeah.
Yes.
If it's your non-pilot, it's just letters and numbers and things. But
Yeah.
it does kind of feel like a diary, though.
Yeah, it's a coded diary. Yeah, my wife
did-
is my wife is in the chat. Oh no.
Did your
Oh, that's
dad
nice.
have
Okay.
entries after he got his private?
Well, so he was a military pilot, and then
Okay.
yeah,
Got my dad's logbook, but his last entry in his logbook was his check ride, because back in those days there was no currency and there
Oh,
were
yeah.
funds, and so I knew how many hours he totally flew.
yeah. My dad
now
got
that
his.
now that I know this is Katie, I appreciate that she's here as the fact checker.
Yes, that's right. That's right. She's school teacher with summer on her hands now, right?
Oh man.
She's,
Oh man.
you know, she's
2 weeks to go, right? 9 days. Yeah.
no, she's out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
out here as well.
Yeah.
My dad got his commercial in February of 1969. Also got his multi-engine February 1969. Also his instrument February 1969. So I guess in the military they just start putting you right through the whole thing.
Yep.
You want to do this?
Yeah, let's do it.
it's close enough to 8 o'clock.
Cool.
I feel pressure with Katie being in the chat now.
I know this is a lot of pressure.
Oh my God.
Welcome to
Okay.
Brian's life, huh?
Straighten up, everybody. Ron, you're good. It's just me. Yeah, there you go.
All right, crank it up.
Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. What is it like to become a pilot in midlife? The challenges are unique, but so are the rewards. Hosts Ben, Brian, and Ted talk learning to fly, growing as pilots, and the joy of flying to destinations. The purpose of the podcast is not to teach, but to share knowledge and experiences. You definitely should not take any advice too seriously from an aviation podcast that uses terms like icing on the vegetables. Okay, checklists are complete. Let's get the show started.
Hello and welcome to the episode 181 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast, where we share experiences and challenges of flying in midlife. My name is Ben. I'm a commercial rated pilot based in the Atlanta metro area. I haven't introduced myself in a long time, Brian. I know that's why you're laughing. And I figured I need to let the audience, remind them actually who I am, because I introduce you guys all the time.
Well,
I
listen.
never introduce myself.
It's just our episode this is episode 182, Ben. So let's just start over.
And also your wife is in the chat too, and I
This is
felt like
throwing
she
all
didn't
the-
know me well enough, so I
the
wanted to make
first
sure
fully-
she knew who I was.
Yeah, this is the first fully botched intro we've ever had. So well done.
Exactly.
So do you
This is
really
the
want me to start
curse.
over?
I do, because we got to
Okay.
get the episode number right. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, because I said 182.
No, you
I
said
said
181.
Okay, here we go. Hello and welcome to episode 182 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast, where we share the experiences and challenges of flying in midlife. My name is Ben. I'm a commercially rated pilot based here in the Atlanta metro area, and joining me tonight are my friends, starting with Brian Siskin, who is based in Nashville, flies a Cherokee 180 named Lucy, and who is a check ride survivor. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening. Glad to be here. Excited for our guest, and this is gonna be a momentous evening.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Also joining us from the West Coast, it's our friend Timestamp Tepper flying Tedder, something like that.
It all works.
Tedder with a temper.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
you've probably never had a temper in your life. I don't know. You seem pretty easygoing.
I am glad to be here. I am wearing shorts because it's summer. In the winter, I wear cargo pants. In the summer, I wear cargo shorts. And it is now raining outside. So it is perfectly Pacific Northwest right now.
Very good. And we're getting some of that taste down here in the South as well. I'm also excited to introduce our friend. He is a designated pilot examiner. He is based in the Queen City of Charlotte, North Carolina. And Ron, I know that we haven't gotten a bio from you, but I'm going from memory. I believe at one point in time you were named the NAFI Instructor of the Year. Do I have that correctly?
You do not have that correct.
You're not. Okay.
Ben, you're on a roll.
I was one of the regional, and a couple of years ago, AOPA has, everybody fills out surveys, and based on my students' feedback, I was a regional instructor of the year through AOPA.
Okay, I wasn't too far off. And you're also received the Lifetime Achievement Award as awarded by AOPA. It's the Wright Brothers.
Wright
Award.
Brothers Award for 50 years of flying without finding the EFA finding anything you did wrong. Yeah.
Very good. See, so I'm
Yes.
not completely off.
This is my 60th year of flying right now.
Wow. That is absolutely incredible. We wanted to bring Ron on, and we'll get to it here in a little bit. We're going to talk all about check rides, and so he's got sharing some numbers with us. For those of you that listen to this podcast and have had an opportunity to either be instructed by Ron or maybe actually have him be your examiner for one of your check rides, he is an amazing individual. And, I think Brian and I can both agree we're both richer from our experiences prior to having met him. So we feel very privileged to have him on the podcast tonight. And I know Ted thinks very highly as well through Opposing Bases and all of our other common friends. So
Thank you. You read that exactly as I wrote it. Thank you very much.
yeah, public school education usually works. Not all the time, though. just wanted to go around the horn real quick. We have not been flying, my brother-in-law and I. The plane is overdue for an oil change, and we cannot get it in until tomorrow. So hopefully I'll get some hours in this week. But I have been studying. I've been advised that if you're going to fly professionally, it's a good idea to start making the transition to Jeppesen instrument approaches and SIDS and stars and all the stuff. So I've been going through, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there, and I'm going to give a shout out to our friend Seth Lake, also DPE, has a great video on going over the differences between the FAA charts and Jeppesen charts. So definitely want to check that out. But I wanted to check in with you guys, Brian. Anything exciting going on since the last couple of weeks?
I've been in a little bit of a decompression mode, and the run that I've done for instrument and commercial has been about the bathtub of my brain is pretty full, and I'm just kind of letting it drain a little bit. But all that to be said, I cannot sit still, and so I've been organizing in my mind, going about CFI and getting a sense of what that path might look like. And there are some immediate things I can do that are not too, I don't know. When you get into that, you got to be fully into it. But there's some, I still got to take the FIA and a couple of things, so I'm going to focus on that, the smaller pieces for right now. But when you do a check ride with our friend Ron Horton here, and he says after the fact that you should consider, being a CFI. It could just be because he really wants me to learn the material, or it could be that he thinks I'm going to be a good CFI. But I've had other people, say that, and we need more CFIs that I think are not just using it as a vehicle to get to the airlines. And being a CFI with 275 hours is possible, but and that's great. But I think that maybe he's leveraging some of this midlife pilot experience to others. I think is a really inviting kind of a path, and just a way of really knowing, codifying, getting out of any kind of I don't want to say imposter syndrome, but it's hard as you keep going through the ratings. You kind of wonder, like, how did I get here? And so there's no way to miss any areas, right? Like, you've got to know everything. So I like the idea of really shoring up weaknesses and things like that. So anyway, I've just been kind of taking stock and inventory of all that and starting to get an idea of what that looks like, while also kind of taking a little bit of a break. But Ted, it sounds like you've probably been more in the air than any of us in the last week.
Yeah, I've been doing more glider stuff this weekend. My plane should be coming out of annual this week, and go pick it up with a friend of the show, Dominic. But did a bunch of glider stuff over the weekend. Had a lot of fun doing that. Always do, but first day I just did my own glider flights, and the second day I stuck around because they needed help on the field. And it always takes a lot of people to do glider operations. And so it's like, well, I'm going to stay around until they seem like there's too many people. And so I was there all day. And it's just great. It's just fun. Go help out and do whatever needs to be done. It's mostly like driving golf carts fast across, the grassy field, towing planes around, grabbing rope off the back of a running engine on a Piper Pawnee, that is one of those things that I am so cautious about, because this whole idea of approaching a plane with a spinning prop, they spin it around so that you're at the tail, and then you grab the rope that's hanging out from behind it, and you've got a tool to pick it up, so you're not risking putting it on your hands and it getting caught or anything else. But still, just standing directly behind the plane to start picking up this rope is not something that I'm used to. The whole, like, I will not let somebody on my plane with the engine running, and here I am walking up to a Piper Pawnee that's running. And so
I have a question.
I'm always very cautious on how I do it.
I thought I saw an Instagram reel. Are there ever any time when the tow plane will pull more than one glider at a time?
I think I've seen that too, but I don't think it's normal.
That
Maybe it
seems-
is just for like dragging them across country for a tow.
Or maybe it's just to move them to the different side of the airport or something. I don't know. You don't have a golf cart showing up. I don't know. I thought I saw the beginning of that reel where they had 3 of them lined up, and they had little carabiners, spread out, and they would start hooking them up. The gliders were all lined up, but I didn't know if that was a thing or not. So
I've never seen that. Boy, it's enough work just to be one person behind a tow plane when you learn how to do that. So
It is fascinating how busy the entire operation is around a glider port. There's so many moving parts, so many things happening, so many individual responsibilities, and a lot of pylons, and just a lot of stuff
Right.
going on.
Right.
It's pretty fascinating. It's so cool that you've been able to immerse yourself in that world. Something else I would love to do. Why don't we go ahead and we got a lot to get to. Let's
Yep.
hustle through our listener feedback. Ben, do you want to knock that one out?
I'll be happy to. This
All
comes
right.
to us from Papa Tango Zulu in reference to 2 weeks ago. I guess we released it last week. Reference of our flying professionally episode. He says, "Great show tonight. As always, your show seems to fill in some. Thank you for giving me a pick me up when I needed it, or just make me take a look closer at something in my pre-flight or sterile cockpit. You guys done more to help me than I can express. Thank you." And that was from Papa Tango Zulu. So thank you for that. Please send us feedback and leave us a 5-star review as well in your podcast player.
All right, I'm gonna hustle through this housekeeping because I'm itching to get our guest on here. So I'm gonna truncate it here. You guys know that we do this ad free and we are Patreon supported. So just help us keep it that way. You can join at various levels. 10% goes to Freedom Aviation Network's anti-human trafficking efforts. Go to midlifepilotpodcast.com for all of the things. You can support us on Patreon. There's a PayPal drop link there. You can email us. You can read things, look at things, check out dad hats and other fun merchandise. And if you're enjoying this, just leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and we'll read it on the air. Make sure you hit subscribe or follow, all of that stuff. Ted.
wow.
It's me,
Yeah.
man.
I was-
passing it on to everybody.
The
Exactly.
sheet here says Patreon Ted, and then
Yes.
I just went and just merged it all.
I
So
think Katie's really
first,
making this.
I know Katie's shadow is looming over the. Katie, please log out.
Words hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So and
We-
Ted.
Yeah, we have some
Ted.
new people that have joined us. I want to say thanks to them. At the Landomatic level, we have Dave K. At Hershey Bar, we have Andy R. and Nicholas M. So thank you for joining us. Also, one of our favorites, Comanche Sue, did a nice PayPal drop to us. It's a nice way for people that don't necessarily want to use Patreon. It's another way you can kind of toss some support to the show if you feel like it. So
Awesome. Thanks,
Comanche
everybody.
Sue is great. I also rounded up some accomplishments or achievements from our people in the last week, and I want to make sure a couple of these are really great, so I really want to point them out.
We need to.
Our friend Midlife Aviator, who had done their private ground, and we didn't know if they had completed the practical or not. He completed the practical, and so he got his private pilot check ride done, and he said it was 11 months and 2 days from his discovery flight. Andy R. in Manchester, UK, passed his general skills test. General skills is basically a check ride, and that was at Barton. That's at Echo Golf Charlie Bravo. There's 4 grass runways there. It's always great seeing especially the UK aerodromes, because they always just have these beautiful looking fields. Our friend that goes by Lat on Discord had an hour milestone. They also got their high performance endorsement done in a 182 turbo and had their first instrument lesson.
Nice.
That's nice to see early on too.
Yeah.
Chef Delta Victor did their long cross country toward getting their private near Wendell Geek, and said in North Carolina, and said the tower controllers were great. I messed up my entry and they helped me down. I love nice controllers at a towered field when you're a student. Like they're helpful. Brian, you got a congrats for getting your commercial from author Richard Bach.
I did.
Amazing.
I was telling my wife it's sort of like I don't know, getting a message from Miles Davis at one of your concerts or something. You know, it was
Exactly.
it was it meant a lot. But he said, "My grandest congratulations to you, Brian, on your achievement. May you keep flying higher and higher, ever Richard Bach." And I just thought, wow. I mean, if there's ever been an influence into aviation and the magic of aviation and the inspiration of aviation, it really comes from him. And, you know, I was raised with all of that, you know, and a lot of us read Illusions when we were young, and it shaped how we think, you know. So long list of amazing books, and what a great just human being and force of pure poetry. So anyway, very cool. It was overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then Sport Pilot Chuck.
Yeah, so Chuck, who we spent some time at Oshkosh last year, I think that Chuck had like 3 flights in at Osh last year. He's been going a long way. He's been flying his friends Remos a lot, kind of partnered up on that. And he got his first tailwheel time. I haven't even opened my drink yet, so tailwheel. It's
Everybody
show.
drink? Yeah.
Here we go. Shared a picture of the very pretty Cessna 185 that he's getting to fly for that. So that was really
amazing.
Yeah. So congrats everyone on
Yeah.
getting things done this week.
All right.
So, Brian, why don't you kick us off and launch
Yeah.
in, since you're the more recent graduate of the Ron Horton DPE School of Commercial Check Rides.
Well, so we are lucky enough to be joined by the great Ron Horton this evening, DPE pilot, been flying for 60 years, just getting warmed up, it seems like. And we are so honored to have you here, Ron. And I want to just say that your story is amazing. We typically don't like to start interviews with tell us your entire aviation story, because especially in your case, Ron, we've only, I mean, I have to go to bed in probably 4 or 5 hours. And for you to tell your story, I think is a near impossible Cliff Notes task. But all that to be said, before we get into this, and we're doing hopefully 2 things tonight, but the first area of focus is, Ron is a curator of very interesting data around his check ride experiences, and gathers a lot of insights that I think everybody will massively benefit from. So whether you are just starting and you want to get a sense of what check rides are like, or what points are going to be looked at, whether you're coming up on a check ride or a second check ride or a third check ride, you're going to want to stick around for all this. But first, welcome, Ron, and thanks so much for being here.
I'm just glad to be here. It's interesting that you say all these ratings, but you guys, Ben's I've never flown multi. 60 years. I'm the guy that's at the bottom of the food chain, right? All the kids that come in, like I'm doing a check ride tomorrow, not 250. The guy tomorrow has 220 hours for his CFI initial.
Oh, wow.
Because he did the commercial at a 141, we only had to have 190 hours. So they're heading on the way to the airlines. And exactly what you said a while ago about you, Brian, is that we desperately need people who have been in the real world of aviation for a while. So I actually, again, solo on my 16th birthday, got my private when I was 17, flew personal flying, owned a 172 with a friend from church for 30 years, sold it, he bought a 182, and have flown a good bit of flying, Bahamas, Florida, up and down the East Coast, a little bit toward the West, all the way. We've been to Oshkosh several times. But I'm at the guy who's at the entry level where people are getting their private instruction. I can do all the single engine check rides up through CFI. But just feel very privileged that the Lord has given me this time to be able to enjoy this. And then, as my lovely bride will say, just be a part of this community that is unlike any other community. Because she says, we just meet the nicest people. And we do. And that's what it's all about. So glad to share. Yes, I'm pretty big on data, or as Southern boys say, data. So I've got data, and in God we trust. All others bring data. So I've got that a little to talk about, and it gives kind of an insight into how check rides are done and maybe what some of the success or failure are. It kind of, I believe, data leads to conclusions. So I'm excited to talk about that tonight. But I'm glad to be here. Because what you guys have done, what you guys have put together is service to people, most of whom, while you'll see them on this virtual world and chat, you will never meet them in person, and you're making their lives different. And that's the true definition of service. And I appreciate that.
Wow. Well, speaking of the
I mean-
confluence of success and failure, you have given both Ben and I check rides. And, you know, Ben, your experience with Ron was a few years ago. What are some of the lessons that you feel like you uniquely walked away from your commercial check ride with Ron? And then Ron, please validate that this actually.
So
Well, I can't really say a lot because you both are still on the installment plan for payment. So I'm still, my silence has been purchased already.
so I'll say this: Ron and I have and others have a mutual friend in Elliot Cox, Echo Charlie, as a lot of people know him. And the night before my check ride, Ron does this really cool thing that I've never seen another DPE do, where he sends you, I believe he calls it
the book.
He's got a book for private, he's got a book for instrument, commercial, etc. And it's, you know, as soon as I got that from Ron, Elliot said, that is gospel. I mean, you have the ACS, you know what you're going to get tested on, but Ron is laying it all out before you. And I kind of went through kind of my game plan. And he just said, he's very thorough in the oral. And I will say he's not wrong. Elliot was not wrong in that regard. Although it was the most enjoyable oral exam I've ever had because it never felt like I was being tested. Although I was. It just felt like, I know a lot of DPEs are trying to make you comfortable, but I thought we were sitting in a hangar just chewing the fat. And there were a couple of times I'm sure Ron said, "You sure about that?" And I said, "Well, let me think about that." You know, and you know I got so relaxed that I kind of felt like my guard was down. And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know, Brian. I don't know if your experience was the same, but I kind of we finished it up, and it was almost. I was like, I almost don't care if I failed or passed because it was just such an enjoyable conversation that
Right.
it was a good time no matter what. But I mean, that was my experience with them.
Yeah,
The,
and
the practical was fantastic. So
I'll just say real quick that my experience with you, Ron, was very similar, which speaks to your level of consistency with your approach. But also there were points where, you know, Ron, you'd be telling a story that is directly relevant to what we're talking about. And then I would find myself just getting a little bit lost in the interest of the story for a minute. But then if I ever, even for a moment, if and the way you put it, Ben, was like letting your guard down. For me, it wasn't really letting my guard down. It was just almost forgetting that I was in the middle of an examination.
right.
And then all of a sudden, this amazing story that's so enlightening and directly related to what we're talking about. But then all of a sudden, it's like a tunnel. All of a sudden, and so now here's the next thing, you know, and it's like, oh gosh, all right, I'm accountable here for information.
That's right.
Let's do that. But Ron, I just really appreciated your style. And before we get into your data insights, I just wanted to ask you, obviously DPEs do have styles. They have different ways of going about it, rooted in strong standards and rules and centralized point of view. How did you develop your DPE style, if that's a way to put it?
So one of the things that I did was I had a great mentor from being a DP when I first came to Charlotte. My background is I worked for the phone company for 30 years and then got an internet startup business, can tell you how to lose a bunch of money if you want to do that. And then spent 14 years at the police department doing technology, and then decided to go into the flying part. So at my time at the police department, I met a guy who just retired from flying at age 82. He was a DP for 26 years. When he retired or stopped flying, he had 23,000 hours, never flew airlines, never flew corporate, 19,000 jewel given.
Holy cow.
So I was his first instrument student in 1984. So we go back a long ways, and he gave me a great example that, yes, there's a test going on. And if you want to know what's going to be on the test, we're just going to read the ACS. But and the FAA actually favors that you do what they call scenario-based testing, which I just translate, tell a bunch of stories, right? So the disadvantage I had when I became a CFI after 47 years of flying was that I had no memory of how I was taught private pilot maneuvers, but I had 47 years of mistakes to build on to teach other people. Similar to what all you guys have done, when you all become CFIs sooner or later, which I hope you will, you have several hundred hours and several years of time of things that were not just coming out of the textbook. And so I try to make that test such that we will talk about the things that are practical. I remember several times it's called a practical test. I'm not, for example, in CFI, I don't spend 3 hours on fundamentals of instruction because the stuff that is important is the things we see every day. And they come out, but not asking questions specifically about that. So I believe that having it scenario based and having, if you can talk about a real life situation they put themselves in, then that has been my goal, and it seems to have worked out. Although I do talk a little bit long, but then again, it's always good to have a story.
You've got a few. So Ted, why don't you help us get to, because I feel like this is an area that a world that you live in is also data related. And so I just thought maybe you could help us funnel into introducing this data set that we're going to be looking at this evening.
Yeah. Ron, I assume that this was that your data is given as a presentation to FAA or to other DPEs?
So what I do is I collect data, and when we go through the slides, I'll talk about the fact that I keep this in every check I've ever done, all grades, whatever. The summary you're going to see here that I sent to y'all, primarily it covers all the check rides, all the different ratings, certificates, and what the pass-fail rates, but then it gets into more detail in the private check rides because that, I figured, what the bulk of the audience is. And I presented that, for example, the school where I teach, we have 25 instructors. So every 6 months, I'll go through and say, here's what we've been doing in the last 6 months. You're doing well teaching these. These over here we need to improve on. So I use the data for that. And then I also create a report card, which is another one of the files I sent an example, that if an instructor wants to hear that, and the student does, I can send them back a report card giving the ratings for each of their things and comments on what happened there. So yeah, I'm an aviation data geek. Yeah, and the spreadsheets are color coded, of course.
So Ron, I wanted to kind of start off in one of the first slides, and we're going to work on getting this on the screen, but we also have a large number of people that just listen to us and don't watch the live stream.
Right.
And so I wanted to kind of hit the first one, and there's this for everybody is the percentage of pass for all different schools being private, instrument, commercial, CFI initial, and CFII. And the pass rate for the private is 72%. And I don't know, I was a little surprised. I felt like that number was lower than I expected. I'm just curious, and one of the other stats that we'll get to in a minute does this necessarily mean that it's a failure or a weather discontinuance, or is it there was something that the student did during either the oral or the practical that did not meet standards and you had to discontinue?
So the 72% for private, 64 for instrument, 80 for commercial, 100 for double I, because there are not very many of those. That has the tyranny of small numbers. 83% for initial, for an overall pass rate of 77%. That was in 2025. That is people who actually failed the check ride.
Gotcha.
That's not discontinuous, it's not anything else. They actually failed the check ride. There you go. So that means that they failed it. And that number, by the way, that's so roughly 80% for the total. That number has stayed the same. I've now done over 500 check rides, and out of the first 10, 8 of them passed. And that roughly 80% has stayed the same for the hundreds of check rides since then. It's just, you'll have 10 in a row that passed, and then 3 in a row will fail. So it just depends. But the number at the bottom where it said 29% of all check rides discontinued, that meant that they had some reason. Discontinuances are either for weather, mechanical, or usually weather, sometimes mechanical, or few of them, the person just feeling bad, like an August day, and they're bouncing around up in the air and saying, my stomach's had all the fun I can have today. Let's come back on one morning when it's smoother. Which means if you take the 29% of that, and you take the 23, in other words, it ends up that only about 48% were complete on the first day. The remainder of them either failed or were discontinued.
So the instrument pass rate is 64%.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, why would you think, Ron, in your observation, do you think that those candidates struggle perhaps more than private or commercial?
Well, instrument is more technical. And the other big issue we have nowadays is the equipment that they are flying. So back in the day, back in the Stone Ages, and you talk about, we haven't been doing this long. I have my friend who's about the same age I am. We owned one, told him we owned a 172 together. His dad was taught to fly by a guy who was taught by Orville Wright. So I'm only fourth generation. You guys are fifth or maybe sixth generation. It just hasn't been that long as far as stuff that's going on that's there. So instruments. So think about back when I was learning instruments or learning to fly. Period. Every airplane had 6-pack. Every airplane had 2 nav comms that looked the same. And you went back. We walked out the airplane. The only thing we had was a sectional. We had no headsets, which I have hearing aids now. I have Lycoming ears, and it was just a much simpler world to learn things. And nowadays, like at our school, we have 11 172s, and we have Cirri also and other airplanes. But just for those 11 172s, with the avionics in them, because I do our website, part of our website, there's over 5,000 pages of manuals to look at for all the avionics. So that's part of the issue. Matter of fact, the last 2 or 3 failures I had were all not understanding managing the avionics.
Yep.
Even something as simple as you fly, you get the approach loaded, everything does, it hits the final approach fix, it intercepts the glide slope, and then the autopilot doesn't start it down. Why do you think that might be, those of you with autopilots?
Yep.
They never push the APR button.
Right.
And that guy had been trained, he was trained in an airplane that had no autopilot and had a 430 in it. And he shows up and takes the check ride at an airplane with 2 G3Xs, 2 GI-275s, a GFC 500 and 750. So that's part of the issue with that being lower rate is it's simply a more technical rating to get nowadays than it was when you only had, only 2 or 3 approaches types to choose from.
And that was my issue on multi was avionics. And there was a ghost needle glide slope. And I thought it was actual glide slope, and it was showing me where I needed to be, and I wasn't there. And so I went below. I want to hit this question
and
from...
even the ones,
go ahead.
Sorry. Even the ones who have the avionics, HSI, the G5, the HSI, I'd say at least 80% of students have no idea how to fly an HSI.
Right.
They do not understand what it does. They don't understand the D-bar and how to intercept it. And the instructors apparently, although the instructors were taught at a school with G1000s, most of them came from a school with G1000s, apparently nobody's ever explained to them how an HSI works. So that's also an issue when they get into stuff that they simply don't understand the avionics.
The Ugly Cup in our chat asked, and I think I understand this, but so on that 77% total pass rate, that meaning 23 failed, you don't mean that they failed and dropped out. You mean that they had to go for a retake at some point.
Yes, yeah. Oh, all of these people ended up, I've only had a couple of people, I've never had anybody who failed and then just gave up. I know 2 pilots who that happened to them, but just weird situations. Right. But in this case, no, those 23% ended up passing on retest. Most of them on the first retest. I have had a couple that it took them 4 tries before they finally passed.
Right.
In those cases, in those 2 cases, it was totally, 90% the CFI's fault, because I can tell whether they're prepared or not prepared.
Wow. So CFII, I know that's not a large sample, but 100% pass rate. Do you think that that's sort of a matter of self-selection results in the sense that anybody that's going for that is likely already pretty on top of their game, or is it just due to the number, or what do you think?
it's kind of like it's the last one you get
Mm-hmm.
in this sequence before you head out to ATP and stuff. So you've had several check rides before. You've had the technical part of it in your instrument check ride already. So the bottom line is you're not really doing a lot new. Now CFI, you're not doing a lot new, but you still have to learn fundamentals instruction and stuff. So plus in this case, this particular year, I think maybe all of those came from the school where I teach, and have given enough feedback to instructors that they know what to expect, what to prepare for, and how to get people ready. And that's probably had part of it to do too. I do check rides for a lot of schools, but probably at least 50-60% are from the school where I teach.
And probably the schools you're at the most often, whether you're there or not physically, are the ones that pay attention to failure rates and feedback, so that doesn't happen again. Where if you go to a school twice in a year, do 2 check rides, they don't have a sample set big enough to say, oh, we're not teaching this very well.
Well, Ted, it really depends upon the interest of the CFI. So, for example, both of those guys who failed 3 times, their instructor came with them to all the check rides, never spoke to me, never asked a question to debrief, never called me up after. And a matter of fact, the guy who failed his instrument 3 times, he's the only guy I've ever had who failed all 3 approaches. And then he came back and failed all 3 approaches again, because he did the exact same thing he did the time before. And the instructor never talked to me to find out what he was doing wrong.
Wow.
So generally, you see a lot of cases, and it just breaks my heart, because I know that these people have the intelligence and the drive to do it, and the CFI simply doesn't care. We have, unfortunately, a number of CFIs who they do not, because I've heard them talking, I'm not going to care about my pass rate. I'm going to renew with a FERC if I have to. And I've also talked to people who say when they go to the airlines, they ask you about the pass rate or failure rate for your personal check rides, but never for check rides your students have given.
Interesting.
Oh,
So
wow.
it depends really upon the interest of the school and the interest of the instructors, whether or not they want those people to be ready for the next time. I've had one guy, he failed. He was one of our instructors. He sent me 5 people, 4 of them failed. And for the last 3, I just took the exact same text and cut and pasted, because he failed the exact same reasons on the following 3 students.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's gotta be frustrating too, I think, when you are, I mean, you've got quite a legacy and you come from, this lineage and all of this, and to see anything that feels like a lack of regard for aviation, just in general, right? As opposed to even just the finer points of being an instructor, that's gotta be, I don't know, as much it's an opportunity to correct some things and to shape some things, but it's also probably frustrating.
Very frustrating, it really is, because I can tell from talking to the people and from the way the answers and stuff, you can tell. I mean, if somebody, it's very obvious when you give them the scenario, they have no idea what you're talking about. Even including, these are things that maybe they even missed on the written test. They missed a question. We don't know what the question was. We know the area. We're going to cover them on that area. So if they haven't done that, then obviously the CFI did not do a very good job of reviewing that.
Yeah, that lack of kind of pride from the CFI is interesting to me. I want to go through this slide really quick, and we're going to move on to the next one. But you tallied up your check ride times, how long it took for ground and flight, and you've got a year-by-year comparison, but we'll just speak on as being about the same. Looks like ground is almost always 3 hours. It can be shorter for commercial, and it's definitely longer for CFI initial, which we all know that CFI is like the marathon check ride. I noticed that all your flight times are 2.0 to 2.4. I felt like when I see people doing private check rides, they're always like 1.2. I was always surprised at how short they are.
So there are DPEs who give shorter check rides, and especially flight. We had a young lady who left our airport, went to a DPE about 15, 20 minutes away in the airplane, met the DP at 9 o'clock in the morning, and was back at our airport at 11.
Wow.
Having flown the round trip and done the flight in the ground. So I don't know how they do it. I really don't. I know that I tell stories. Mine are probably longer than most of them are. The flight, however, that's going through all the maneuvers in the ACS. And I don't know what you could do to get that to an hour. I guess you maybe you wouldn't fly the cross country. Maybe you'd only fly to the first checkpoint. Maybe you wouldn't do a diversion. I don't know. I've never asked anybody. It's not my business. But the other reason that the ground part, the ground part varies more based upon how well the student's prepared, whereas the flight part, it doesn't make a lot of difference. If you do a maneuver good or badly, it takes the same amount of time. If you hit the mark on your landing or you miss about 1,000 feet, it still took the same amount of time. It may be a little bit longer if you do, the two things that cover that is if you do go-arounds, which are certainly allowed on almost every landing, except for power off 1/8, everything else go-arounds are allowed. And it also depends upon how fast they fly, because on the cross-country, I have people who fly at 2,000 RPM cruise speed. We're getting passed by tricycles. I don't know why people fly an airplane and don't fly it fast. They're paying by the hour, not by the gallon, but they do.
Right.
But yeah, so I tell people I do not schedule more than one check ride in a day. There are people that do 2 and 3 a day, and good for them. I really don't know how they do it. I'm sure it's completely legitimate, and I'm just not as good as they are.
Well, it could be an advantage. I don't know. I prefer to slow things down a little bit, not feel rushed if I was in that situation. So I would appreciate that. This next slide is one that we really wanted to get to. And
we've got a lot of folks in our listenership that are really literally taking their discovery flights. And we know flight schools will tell them, oh, we can, get you here and out, in 45 hours, 50 hours, whatever the case may be. Not typically realistic numbers. So I found these very interesting. Ted, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, go ahead.
So I think we still have a lot of folks. So you're saying that the average private student in 2025 took 87 dual hours, 16 solo to the certificate for 103 total. But students who finished under the 12 months average only 80 hours total.
Correct.
What does training faster actually correlate with? Quality of instruction, student dedication, or is it something else?
It has to do with when you get into CFI and Thorndike's laws of learning, it has to do with the recency and exercise. Let's say that you're learning to play the guitar, or you're learning to do whatever that music that Brian does, or you're learning to go do whatever. If you do it 3 times in a week, you'll retain more than if you do it 1 time in a week. And what happens, of course, in aviation is it's not just you learning or retaining. It's the fact that because some people, like high school students, we have a lot of high school students, they can usually only fly on weekends, especially during the wintertime. Can't get there before dark after school, which means if next weekend, that Saturday lesson they have, it's raining. And the next weekend it's airplane broke and nothing else to replace it with. So you maybe even last minute kind of thing, like the tire blew the day before. But therefore, the next 3 weeks, you'll definitely be repeating that lesson. So that's one thing that the people who finish in less than 12 months, they are generally flying more often, more times during the week than the other people are. As you see at the bottom of that, it said the shortest anybody finished was in 4.7 months. I had a guy the year before that finished in 10 weeks, but he had plenty of time, plenty of money. He flew 4 times a week and knocked it out. And the longest last year was a guy that was almost 32 years. We see a lot of rusty pilots like that start and stop, but you can't call them a quitter. So, but yeah, that as you notice also on that chart, the ones who can see it, that those dual hours have been going up. The solo has been running 16, 17, 18, and dual's going from 64 to 87. I think the primary thing that is driving that is at a school, which most people who go to school has multiple instructors, and those instructors are on the way to the airlines. And so they're having to change instructors because their instructor finished their 1,500 hours.
So to reframe that, and tell me if I'm wrong, Ron, but what you're saying here, but what this data says to me is in just the last 5 years, the time it takes to get your private pilot certificate has gone from 81 to 103 hours, which is a 20%-ish or more increase just in the last 5 years. And you believe that the largest reason or contributor to that drastic change is just the fact that we've got these mills running and people are just abandoning their students halfway through.
Well, they're not abandoning; they're going off. So
Yeah.
it's a 20% increase in total. But look at the percentage increase when you look at dual. It's actually 30%, a third more, 64 compared to 87.
Mm.
So yes, you're seeing those people. That you look up. The other thing that kind of gives a hint to that is look up because the FA asked me about this first time I presented this data, and I went back and gathered data from everybody else. How many dual hours do people here think it's reasonable to have before you solo an airplane? I know I did mine in 8, but then again, like I said, we didn't have all this other stuff. A lot of people are 10 to 15, maybe 20, right? The average for 2025 was 40 hours of dual before solo.
Yeah.
And
That's
that to me
crazy.
is just staggering. But I know because when I send out the package to my students, I have them fill out the hours, and I can also when they're all their aeronautical experience, because so many instructors get that wrong and the students don't understand what they have to do. And so I see people doing, and this may again contribute to these number of dual hours. They're doing they're doing dual cross countries before solo flight. They're doing night flight before solo flight. They're doing things that have nothing to do with the person soloing the airplane.
Oh.
And I don't know why. I don't know if it just fit in their schedule.
That's
I
interesting.
would hope it's not just an instructor trying to get some extra money early. I don't know what it is, but that's been amazing. Now, I've had guys who took 4 years and therefore they had 50 hours. And that's understandable because they started and stopped a bunch. But you look at even the people who took less than 12 months still had 34 dual hours before they soloed. I personally think that's kind of criminal.
Let me describe some of the numbers that we're seeing for people. Basically, from the years 2021 to 2025, we're looking at the number of dual hours somebody had when they got their private and the number of solo hours they had. That solo number has stayed the same. Arguably, it's gone down, but it's all 17 hours plus or minus 1.
Yep.
The dual hours to private in 2021 was 64. By the time we hit 2025, it was 87, and it's just gone up every year by a bit each year. That's a 36% gain in those dual hours. So I don't know. In my mind, I think of 80 hours is kind of a target for going to a private check ride, and what we're seeing is 87 dual hours before the check ride. So those are large
Expensive.
numbers.
Expensive
and
hours.
to add that up, it means that we've gone from 81 total hours to 103 total hours by the time they get to you for a check ride.
I had a guy who was probably mid-40s, so he wasn't a kid flying through going to the airlines. He took him 24 months, which is understandable. The person who has a job and is working and doing whatever. In that 24 months, he had 8 instructors.
Oh.
He had each of them for 3 months and got each of them just by random choice at the end of their 1,500 hours. And he said, and he wasn't mad. He said, I don't regret it. I'm a better pilot now. He said, but I had to prove myself by redoing stuff I'd already done for the previous instructor.
Yeah.
And so I think somebody who has a single instructor start to finish, which hardly ever happens nowadays, but if they do, I think those hours could easily be shorter.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that I see people showing up for check rides with 10.1, 10.2 hours of solo and 90 hours of dual. And I asked the instructor, why is that? And they said, well, I was trying to save them money. I said, no, you weren't. You could have taken 10 hours of dual, made them solo. The person would have been a better pilot, and you would have had other students to fly with anyway. They would have saved money. Because if you think about it, those people, without exception, struggle to land the airplane because of those 10 hours solo. At least 5 of them had to be a solo cross country, which means they only had 3 or 4 hours left to practice all the maneuvers, including practicing landings. And instructors, especially young ones, are under the mistaken assumption that people get better when they fly with their instructor. Up to a point they do, but at some point, learning to fly is like learning to solo an airplane or land an airplane, I guess specifically, is like learning to dive off the 10-meter platform. Nobody has to tell you if you go in the water straight. So once you've done that, even going out and flying by yourself is how you get skilled at those things. Because when I teach students, once they've soloed every lesson, every dual lesson after their solo, I get out of the airplane and give them at least 15 minutes to go around the pattern 2 or 3 times when they finished, because that's where confidence comes from, is flying by yourself. Commercial, a lot of people, a lot of students, a lot of schools promote doing the commercial 129 paragraph 4 solo. They have them do it PDPIC, performing duties of pilot in command. Same thing, because they, obviously they pay more money for that. That was created because nobody's going to let you fly multi-solo. But even for single, they do that. And I think it's because we have a generation that just doesn't have enough confidence, hasn't been told to fly solo enough to get confident about it.
So just kind of as a wrap up, and for those in the chat, we're going to do this into a doubleheader because there's so much more we want to get into. But Ron, do you track the demographics of your candidates for all the different check rides that you do for? And I'm not looking maybe even by age brackets. I'm just curious, do the majority come from the school that you teach at? And are they younger generation? Is there anything, any comments?
I could go back and look at that because I got all the 8710s, the actors. I could go back and pull that. Be interesting data. Had I been given warning that you asked? Never mind. And I could do that.
That's me. I'm going to ask you the tough ones.
Exactly. But I would say, just in general, I would expect, first off, about 60% of my check rides come from the school I teach at. So the other 40% come from others. This week, I've got school people coming from Raleigh, Richmond, Greenville, South Carolina, and Knoxville, Tennessee. So, but mainly for CFI initial, because there's not very many DPEs, not near as many DPEs that can do CFI initial. But even private, I got a person coming later this week from Raleigh. I don't know why. Maybe just, I don't know how he ended up with me, but anyway, he did. So I get a lot of that, and I would say probably 60 to 70% of those people are less than 25.
Okay,
that's my guess, and are on the airline track. Now I've got some older people. I've had. One of our guys, CFI, we had built his hours, and he went to airlines at age 57. So, but yeah, definitely, as one of your commenters said, Nick Ballard, we definitely need more midlifers as CFI. That's why I'm trying to encourage you guys to do that, because that you have a knowledge base that these young students desperately need, and even the older students too. But it's the people who I think struggle the most are people who are trained by an instructor who spent their entire life in training. We had a young lady show up with us about 3 years ago. She had gone through a school, paid whatever, over $100,000 she had CFI II multi-engine instructor altogether. And she had 11 months before she was a dental hygienist, never been in a small airplane. So she was technically a good instructor because she could fly the airplane, but as far as anything else going on, she struggled with that.
Interesting.
I think of Brian, and if you want to talk about teaching somebody from experience rather than what you get as a younger instructor, and we're generalizing here, but speaking of density altitude and flying to Marfa, go ahead and explain that. If you've basically done most of your flying within 50 miles of home, you're going to have a lot of trouble doing that. You've only got so much you can speak to. If you've gone to Marfa, or you've been stranded on the Outer Banks, or whatever the story may be, those are the differences that I see. But this is just
not to mention just the time of being involved with other pilots and learning their craft and being a witness to the mastery of people like Ben.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
By the way, I know one of the commentators says
chart
missing the cost of planing an instructor $ seem unrealistic that many hours. That chart was done based upon the rates we had at the time. Our 172s at that time were 176, and our instructors were 55.
Okay.
So it depends upon the airplane. Matter of fact, if you want to change that number, just come to us and rent one of our SR22 turbos, which right now we make a bargain. It's their $540 an hour dry, add about 120 for gas an hour, and the instructor's 140. So for around $800 an hour, that number would go up a little bit.
Just a little bit.
And there are people who do that. Yes. I actually had a guy who the oldest check ride I've ever given, over private check ride I've ever given, was a guy 64, and he bought a SR22 turbo to learn to land. So there are people out there that have money.
You could buy a lot of J3 Cubs for that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
One
Well,
every
all
10
right.
hours. Yeah.
So we're gonna do a part 2 here, Ron. Are you okay to hang out with us and do another round
sure.
here? Okay,
Yeah.
so just to wrap this up a little bit, we're going to be coming right back with because I still want to talk about common failures and the marginal areas that you're uncovering all the time and experiencing, and then also I want to dig a little bit more into the CFI picture, as well as also want to illuminate some of these human factors and the human side of what you're experiencing and what has impressed you or stuck with you as a DPE in your experience. So we're going to get into more of those things. In the meantime, Ben,
Yeah.
do you want to conclude this
Yeah.
episode and then invite everybody back
Yes.
for and Ted, maybe explain how this is all going to work. These double headers can be very complicated.
Yeah, let me explain it here. When we say we're coming right back, if you're listening to this on the podcast, we'll see you next week. If you're listening to this on the live stream, just stay here. We'll be back within 5 minutes. So we have trouble. We're not very smart. We have trouble pretending that we're going to see you in a week. And so that's why we talk in both terms. So Ben, you want to take us out of this?
I'd be happy to. So I want to remind everybody, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and hit subscribe on your app. And I'll go ahead and ask just to make sure we don't have any other comments for the good of the order.
No, thank you, Ron, and we'll see you again in 3 minutes.
Yes.
I'll hang out.
All right.
So this comes from the AOP Bank of Wisdom, is I think what they refer to it as. The worse the weather, the more likely it is that you'll have a vocal passenger insisting that you go. Signing off, episode 182 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. Thanks, everybody. All right. I'll be right back too.
Hang on just for a minute so we kind of swap who's
Sure,
out.
sure.
But not a single mention of episode 182 from you?
I was looking at 180. I know.
Well, not just the 181, because it was written wrong in there. That was because of the copy. I mean, like, this is your episode, man. Like,
you're right. It is. I dropped the ball on it. I'm a complete player.
but we kind of got distracted at the beginning too. So
Got very distracted at the beginning. So, and I
All right,
blame
see you in a
Katie.
sec.
All right.
Yeah, Katie. Yeah, I like that.
And if Katie, if you're still in the chat, I really do not blame you, but I was a little bit more nervous thanks to you.
Comedically speaking, we do. Yeah. Hey, Dev. Nice to see you here. Mr. Ballard. Yeah. Rich, man, it's so hard to talk about next week, aka in 3 minutes, and I feel we don't like overproducing the episodes and having zero mention that we're actually recording these at the same time. We like doing these episodes totally live and not packaging the beginnings and ends and stuff. So it means we get a little bit more of this confusing stuff, but whatever. Dude, I'm going to mention something about that on this next podcast. I've already got it written down because it was amusingly offensive, but yeah. Hey, Ron.
Us old people appreciate breaks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So usually we just kind of go in phases here as we step out, and then I was just sitting here talking to people in the comments, So Katie's still here, and yeah, she's like, "You messed us up." No, we mess up very well on our own. We don't need help. Yeah. Mr. Taylor and Telly, I was speaking with a woman today who, wait, what's today? Today's Monday. Yesterday, who was going for a scenic glider ride, and she said that she got her private 60 years ago and hasn't flown since for money, and she was in upstate New York at, I don't remember which military base she was at then 60 years ago. I was like, lady, I want to get your story. I'm just sitting here throwing gliders around. I don't have time to do this, but it was just like, man, she's like, oh yeah, 6 years ago I did, because she was trying to say she's comfortable in being around gliders, and it was very cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Well, I want to try glider, Ted, but I called down there and explained my size, and they said, come down, we'll see if we can squeeze you into something. At 6'5", 220, they said, maybe.
Oh, we have I know that the one they use for scenic stuff is 240 is a limitation. So
yeah. Well, we just got 2 alpha pipistrelles a couple of months ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I would have to drive it like this because the bars I can get, but the bar across the top comes like right here. Yeah. But they're flying all the time. People love them. They have all glass and got autopilot, everything. So
and right now, 4 gallons an hour.
Yeah, but see the thing that's amazing is we're charging the same rate as the 172.
Yeah. Well, they're
but of course it's a newer airplane.
Yes,
newer airplanes. So they're very popular. I was surprised because the crosswind component on them, they don't even weigh 1320. They weigh 1222 gross. And the crosswind component is actually higher than a 172.
My flight design, which is, people think I've got a pipistrel, it's pretty similar. Crosswind component of 16.
Yeah, well, theirs is 18. Anyway.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think your airplane is a far better looking airplane than pipistrel.
They're all fun though. Yeah, I'll take them. I wouldn't complain about any of those.
Yeah.
Is Katie still in the chat?
She is.
She's in the kitchen.
Okay.
Yeah. We're talking about upstate New York. So there's a nice picture there.
There he is. I'm not saying that it was a long check ride, but we had to take the picture inside because it got dark.
No, but I'll tell you what. Anybody that saw this picture, their first question was, "How did he fit in your plane?"
Yeah. Actually, your plane's roomy. I liked your plane.
Yeah, me too.
I told you we had an arrow in the fleet, and my wife, we went to the beach in it. She loved the speed. I mean, we got it in a hurry, but she took a magazine and she just put it on her head the entire time because of the sun. So, and I have had people. Matter of fact, he had a 235 like Mark's, and he had his iPad mounted up on his yoke in the summertime, and it overheated about the time we diverted him for his diversion. Oh. And he forgot that he needed a circle where he knew he was, because we're doing 150 over the ground. And by the time, in the 4 minutes it took him to get his iPhone out, he had no idea where he was. So.
Goodness. Yeah. I brought some sectionals to the check ride, but they were from 1997 and 2001. But they were my dad's, and so I thought,
there you go.
Yeah, bring my dad along. But there's a lot of airports on there that don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
If you want to see, you can go to the National Archives, and they have sectionals back to the 30s.
The Library of Congress. Yeah.
Yeah, Library. Yeah, you can look up
you can watch as radio coverage like expands.
Yeah,
it's like for a while there's just like routes that you might be able to talk to someone.
Well, they had radio ranges. Yeah.
Yes.
People didn't know nobody here today knows what a radio range is.
What's the is that a DF?
No, you would have a range, and it would have on the chart it says dot dash dash dot A and N, and you actually listen. There's no needles. If you heard an A, you're on one side of the airway. If you heard an N, you're on the other side, and in between they nulled out.
Yeah.
So it was that was a little before my time. I did have VORs when we started, NDVs.
They'd invented radio when you started flying.
They had, yes. I knew Mr. Marconi well.
Yes. All right. Let's get into this.
All right, Ben, you got everything you need?
And By the way, I finally found the because I'm on a different interface than you guys for whatever reason. It was terrible, but I finally figured out that I do have the buttons to change. So
Oh, good.
Brian, if you need me to do it, I actually can do it now, where I couldn't do it
Great.
before. So I'll probably go back to that one when we do it. But we don't usually do a lot of video switching, but we also don't present very much.
Right.
So
This may be the first time. So yeah, I'm
we're
ready.
not the brightest.
Yeah,
And I want to, since Katie, if she's listening, the reason I got so fouled up is because you remember the Seinfeld episode where Costanza had the two worlds crashing?
World's colliding.
I make an ass of myself in front of AJ and Nathan and everybody in the chat all the time. But then when the spouses get on the chat, now it's like my worlds are clashing and I can't make, so that's where it went wrong for me.
It was wrong in your show doc. So
Yeah, and I didn't capitalize that it was episode 182 and I fly at 182.
yeah. But yeah, it said welcome to episode 181 in the doc. So
Yeah.
I,
Right,
And
so-
I'm Ron Burgundy. I'm going to read what's written.
Speaking of the doc, I'm just cleaning
we have
that
a
up.
second, We have a second doc.
Oh, we do.
Yeah.
Although there's not much difference. So
Oh. Okay. So
are you
I'm
guys
what
going to move
saying.
to the new one or not?
I'm going to take off I'm going to make sure we start at
Good.
common failures. And
Yes. Ben,
we
you're
can
on the new doc.
I'm on the new doc. I'm on 183, part 2.
I am closing the other one.
All right. Yeah.
Me too.
I like how you have 183 bold.
Yeah. Hey, Ben. Yeah,
F you, San Diego.
exactly. Oh, man. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. What is it like to become a pilot in midlife? The challenges are unique, but so are the rewards. Hosts Ben, Brian, and Ted talk learning to fly, growing as pilots, and the joy of flying to destinations. The purpose of the podcast is not to teach, but to share knowledge and experiences. You definitely should not take any advice too seriously from an aviation podcast that uses terms like icing on the vegetables. Okay, checklists are complete. Let's get the show started.
Hello and welcome to episode 183 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast, where we share experiences and challenges of flying in midlife. Today, we're going to continue our discussion from last week, but it was really about 5 minutes ago with our good friend, DPE extraordinaire Ron Horton. And with always joining me, it's still with us, our friend in Nashville, Tennessee, under the Bachelorette Super Bravo, Charlie now, but soon to be Bravo, maybe one day. Flying a Cherokee 180 named Lucy, it's our friend Brian. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. So glad to still be here with you guys. And thanks for everybody hanging in with us on the chat. And for those that are getting this audio a week later, welcome back.
Also joining us from the left coast, it's our sport pilot extraordinaire, our good friend, Timestamp Tedder. Good evening, sir.
Hey, glad to be here. Yeah.
And we're glad to have you. And also returning with us, it's our DPE extraordinaire, Ron Horton, based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And tonight we're going to be continuing our discussion on check rides and statistics. Ron has assembled a great deal of information. Would highly recommend, if you're getting this episode and you haven't listened to 182 first, I would probably check that one out. It will probably make a lot more sense, but we're going to continue the discussion tonight. And Brian, do you want to go ahead and hit the belly scrub real quick?
Yeah.
We haven't had any new reviews or feedback since about 7 minutes ago, so I figured we'd go ahead and hit that.
Right.
Hey,
But
I
we
do
can
have
just
to,
remind.
I do have to say I left a couple things for the what have you been up to section that I really wanted to cover. The first was I was
I
talking
missed that,
to a
Ted.
guy.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Well, Ted,
I was talking to a
so
guy
what have you
who
been
was
up to in the last 7 minutes?
I talked to this guy who is a DER, which is a designated engineering representative of the FAA. He's a test pilot. He flew for Horizon, and Horizon flew the Dash 8s, Q400s turboprops. And so he was typed in that and in the Metroliner and nothing else. But as a test pilot, he has flown a lot of different planes for airlines and everything else. So the one story I remembered was he said, we needed to test the 777 at 5,000 feet, gear out, flaps out on a steep turn. And I got halfway through the turn and realized I was going to hit my own wake. And I'd done that in 150, but I've never done it in a 777. So he talked about that. He also talked about what it sounds like when an airliner is stalling. You can hear it go from the tail back all the way up to the head of the plane. And I just wanted to pick that guy's brain. That was very cool. So
That's fascinating.
I cannot imagine there are a lot of DERs in the country nationwide.
Yeah. He worked with some of the big airlines.
That's very cool.
There was also a young lady on the field that was comparing the differences between our styles of processing things. And she said, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were a millennial." That's the most offensive thing I've ever heard. I cannot believe that somebody thought I was millennial. So
Wow.
How dare they?
welcome to midlife.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, well, let me hit this real quick. And by the way, we don't have any reviews in the last 5 minutes, but that should not keep you from giving us a review. You can go to Apple and leave us a review. We'll read it on the air if it's 5 stars. And it doesn't even have to be a positive review as long as it's 5 stars. You can say whatever you want in there that is an absolute critique of this podcast. You can just make fun of our families, whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter, but we just need those 5 stars. So just putting that out there. Actually, don't make fun of us. All right. So, now Ben, you're saying that you would like me to throw it to you.
No, that's
Ted
to
is
me.
saying.
Oh,
that he would
Ted.
like for you to throw it.
Yeah.
Ted. Okay. I'm trying to get through this, guys.
We're all out of sorts tonight.
All right.
So
what do we got?
in the last few minutes, we don't have anybody new on Patreon. We don't technically have any new Discord comments or accomplishments, but I did want to point out that Brian on his personal Patreon put up what I'm calling slow TV, if you're familiar with the European slow TV movement, which was basically he and Katie driving in his MR2. But really what it is it's some of his electronic music that he's released to his Patreon supporters. And that was
Okay.
really cool.
So that's just to the Patreon supporters for now, but
Yes.
just as totally unrelated, just to make some kind of sense. I've spent a lot of my years, 30 years making music. I got a ton of records that I've made, and I've just been going through this massive effort of working with a friend of mine to get all of these albums remastered up to snuff at the same kind of levels and sound. And then I'm just going to release them all on YouTube because I'm so tired of dealing with digital distributors and all of those things. So anyway, so I'm starting out through the Patreon, and then I just thought, well, I need some kind of video content for these things because they're going to be on YouTube. So we quickly made a video. It's just basically me and Katie driving around in the MR2, but the soundtrack is a record that I made, and there's going to be about, 20 or 30 more of those records coming. So if you're really interested in a bunch of weird music, you can do that. But in the meantime, housekeeping. Let me just bang this out real quick, and thanks for Ted for mentioning that. I appreciate it. But housekeeping, join our Patreon community and help us keep the Midlife Pilot podcast ad-free. Your support makes the show possible, and every membership level gets you into our incredibly active Discord community. We have all these various levels of which you can join that get you various things. They have funny names. We'll get into that some other time. We don't have such a precious guest on here with us. 10% of every dollar goes directly to Freedom Aviation Network's anti-human trafficking efforts. And for all the things related to the podcast, Patreon, emailing us, all of the things, merchandise, just go to midlifepilotpodcast.com. So now let's get back to where we were in episode 182. We had been basically talking from Ron's data set of his very carefully tracked DPE experiences. And like Ben said, please go back to episode 182 and get the initial context for that data set and all of that. We want to make sure that we're getting the most out of your time, Ron. So I'm going to go ahead and start, which is basically the first question. And we're in sort of the category now of questions around what I think a lot of people are interested in. Whenever you're going about a check ride, whether it's private or down the line, you're always looking for, where are the landmines? Where are people commonly failing? Where can I not be that person? You're trying to give yourself as best of a chance as you possibly can. And it's a lot when you're carrying the burden of all the information in your brain and you got nerves and all of those things. But in the realm of common failures and these kind of marginal areas, your data set suggested basically that the most commonly failed ground tasks included weather and cross-country planning. And do you think that those, Ron, are just knowledge gaps genuinely,
Yeah,
or
if
are
you
they?
can back up one slide before that one for people who are watching on video.
Yeah.
So that just shows what I do is I take all of every task for every check ride and I score them. The yellows are ones, which mean it was marginal. The twos are green, which means it was solid. The blues are threes, means it was excellent. And red means it failed. So I have a scoring for each of those tasks for every single check ride. So then go to the next one, which actually shows the failure items. And you're right, in the ground task, and I showed the last 2 years. I didn't go back and get all the other years. So weather and cross-country flight planning and airspace, all kind of about the same. Weather was a bigger task back in 2024 until people finally figured out that they needed to know what aviationweather.gov was. Because what was happening is people have been taught by ForeFlight apparently, and only ForeFlight. And so when it came time to look to more detail about weather and getting more information, and especially looking for the proper weather forecast for an airport not served by TAF, then they can either do aviation.gov or 1-800-WEATHER brief, either website. Aviationweather.gov, I think, is a better designed website, certainly easier to understand. And so that 5 to 2 dropped down where the word finally got out, at least to people in our school, that because I had people who had no clue, and then they would go ask our chief pilot, what is this aviationweather.gov that he was asking me about? So we finally educated them on that. Cross-country flight planning, generally that is where they are looking at maybe it's not even so much the route. Maybe it's because that part of if you look at the actual task involved, that part of the check ride involves things like how do you follow the aircraft flight plan? You're supposed to know that. It's in the ACS. Do you know what a hotspot is? And difficulty calculating the crosswind component. A lot of the failures to the ground things are if somebody has missed an area on a question, then I get the ACS code. I don't get the question. They don't need it, right? Ever since January 23rd, 2010, we have not been allowed to review the questions, but at least, 2020, but at least we get the area. So, and that really is better because we know we have to cover the whole area. So these are things that people have missed that they also had already missed the question, which means it should have been reviewed and apparently was not. So airspace, I think people try to make airspace way too complicated. If you think about airspace, weather minimums, for example, there's only 4 numbers to remember: 3 152s, 5 111s, 1 mile clear clouds, 3 miles clear clouds. There's some stuff for golf above 1200, but that's only Alaska. I don't even ask about that. I think people have they try to learn that from a chart. It's way too complicated. So I think it's not being taught very well. Takeoff landing tables, that's understanding density, altitude, and how the effect of it on takeoff and landing. Systems, again, that's almost always questions that somebody missed and then they didn't follow through with trying to figure out what those were about. And then weight and balance for people who simply cannot calculate weight and balance. I accept weight and balance, even prefer weight and balance on private from ForeFlight. There's nothing wrong with doing a ForeFlight by that time. I certainly want to teach them the basic way before, but certainly nothing wrong because it's more accurate, easier. And I've had people who simply had no idea whatsoever. Matter of fact, one person showed up with a very perfectly drawn, almost like calligraphy, weight and balance. And I give him my scenario, which includes weight and balance and night fuel reserve and all other kinds of stuff. I give one scenario that covers all that. And I came back and he had 3 or 4 pieces of paper that he was writing on. It wasn't the same writing as his original weight and balance. So it was obvious his instructor did his weight and balance for him, and he didn't even know where to start. So those are the main ones that are on there. We'll talk about in the next slide about some of the things that were passed, but were very marginal. So yeah, whether if you understand that ForeFlight's a good place to start with, and then to get more detail or specifics for your route, be able to draw that route on aviationweather.gov's charts, know which charts to look for there, then that usually takes care of those kinds of things.
Real quick, Brian, I remember after your commercial check ride, Ron had asked you to do, gave you a new scenario to calculate. And I believe you said that there were a little bit of nerves. I mean, everything checked out, but you're like,
Yeah, well, look, okay, I thought we agreed that we would not bring up my check ride, okay? Because I have this positive memory of it, right? And I don't want to
you did fine. I don't see why you're just own it. You got it.
So that is the thing that was funny to me about that scenario is, and Ron, I think even made note of this, that I'm sort of like I don't know. I'm always looking 2 steps ahead, thinking too much, and then trying to figure out where the landmines are, and I think that maybe instructors maybe cause some of that feeling, I think, because they want you to be prepared and all that. But DPEs are generally not trying to play games with you or walk you down paths that you cannot get out of, right? They want you to succeed, and they're not trying to trick you. But in the case of my recalculation, it gave me this scenario, and I go and I recalculate everything, and I was expecting it to be this, okay, now I've got to make these adjustments, I got to do all these things, and it's going to be very complicated, and I'm going to have a lot of planning to do. It just so happened that, and maybe it was just a miscalculation on your part, Ron, but I thought this is bad because everything fits fine. Like I can actually just do all of this with full fuel, and there's no problem here. So where's the landmine? What am I missing?
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, all my check rides,
overthink it.
private especially, involve food. So we're either if you get Claxon, Georgia as your destination, if you get a coastal destination, we're going to bring seafood back for your weight and balance problem. If you get somewhere in state, it's probably going to be barbecue. And if you get to Claxon, Georgia, unfortunately, all the young people don't know, but that's where 4 million pounds of fruitcake are made each year.
Yep.
And it turns out that Claxton fruitcakes each weigh 1 pound, so we're going to bring extra fruitcakes back. So I give them a thing saying, here's what we do, and maybe we bring another person back, and how it's a real life calculation where you would actually do that. So yeah, Brian was very suspicious. He felt for certain it couldn't possibly be that he was going to be able to bring what I wanted to bring back.
But I think that's something indicative.
He's driving an SUV, so he had plenty of room.
I think it's indicative of all midlife pilots taking a check ride is we're definitely going to overthink it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, now can we pull up the tables with the takeoff and landing tables where it had, I think it was like half of their students being kind of marginal in 2024, down in 2025.
It's on the screen right now.
Yeah.
Takeoff and landing tables for 50% were marginal in 2024 and 35% in 2025. The bulk of people who are training in Cessnas, every now and then I'll get a restart Cessna, but most of them are in legacy Cessnas before they quit making them in 1987. So, and those tables up through the Mike models are not intuitive, and they in fact are density altitude tables. And so if you calculate density altitude, you can read this number straight in there, but you don't have to add the extra 10% anyway. So it's just, and all the students, all the instructors usually come to us, they all came through schools where they had brand new airplanes and had tables that were very easy to read. And even the old, as you know, like Brian's airplane, the older Pipers, you need to be able to figure out where on the curve that number is to figure out density, altitude, and all that stuff. So it generally has to do, I think, with a lot of the CFIs never having had to look at that before, because newer airplanes have more easily understood tables. And so the difference between 2024 and 2025 is because people kept on doing badly on that, and finally they realized they needed to teach it better.
Let me explain this table a bit. So what we're looking at is topic areas for ground that you noted people just did enough to pass. They really struggled with it. Their knowledge wasn't complete. And to simplify, we're seeing 2 things that are very common. The top one is the takeoff and landing tables. 50% got a marginal grade in 2024, and night preparation, it was 63%. So almost 2/3 barely struggled through it, and those have improved. Those are takeoff and landing is 35%. Night prep is 42% in 2025. So those are improvements, but that's substantial. That even in
Well, the
2025.
night
Yeah.
preparation. This is a great example of why you don't have to be perfect to pass a check ride. As you can see, if I had asked for perfect, then 63% of people would have failed in 2024.
Right.
That is simply the people who don't understand it's 3 takeoffs in the past 90 days as well as 3 landings.
And we all think of the landings. So
They
if you
think of
took off during the
landings,
day,
and
you can't count it.
I even had them go with if they choose, oh yeah, I'm good. In the scenario I give them, it's a scenario, it's not a question. And they, of course, they aren't good. And I say, okay, let's read the regulation. And they go find the regulation, and it's taken as many as 3 or 4 times of them reading the regulations. They finally understood that it says takeoffs and landings in the previous 90 days. So that's what that is. That's not as bad as it seems, because it's a relatively minor part of the overall picture. Certainly the takeoff landing tables is much more important.
Yeah, it's such a good example though, and I think at the private level, you're learning how to read the FARs and how important that is, and so I can see that. Man, those takeoff and landing tables. I just remember all the test questions that are the Piper charts, the spaghetti charts, and it's like I just hated those things.
They
I
were
just give them, I
Xerox.
give them an actual situation of actual weather and weight. It's actually part of the scenario I give them with weight and balance. You're flying this airport. We're going to fly back at night. We're going to do this. Can I carry this person? Can I bring this food? And then what might take, once you finally figure out your takeoff weight, could I take off from that airport given this set of weather conditions?
Yeah.
So Ron, I'm curious also about this piece, 30% in 2024, yet to be defined, I guess, for 2025, or we're still waiting on that, but systems. And I wonder sometimes, just to kind of stay a little high level and then kind of get down to this examination observation, I wonder if, especially as a midlifer, I think, take for granted that we all grew up around combustion engines and perhaps more primitive devices in our lives. And I think that it's very possible, I'm not sure it's empirical, but I feel like it's possible that the younger that you are, the less likely it might be perhaps that you natively or experientially, prior to even getting into aviation, have any sense of how a combustion engine works, or you haven't had to fix your parents' lawnmower, or I don't know, just whatever it is, just to get some basic mechanical framework of thinking. And I just wonder if maybe that's a contributing factor to the systems.
That is spot on. I was getting results like this, and so I asked my granddaughter, who's 25 now, when she was about 17 or 18. I said, "So Maddie, do you know how to check the oil in your car?" She said, "No." I said, "You know why it needs oil? Because your Grammy, my wife, ran her little Volkswagen out of oil 50 years ago and melted the engine." She said, "No." I said, "Do you know how to change this tire on your car?" She said, "Yes." And she pulls out her AAA card and says, "That's how I changed the tire." So yeah, they have no mechanical knowledge. Now, by the way, the reason it's blank in the 2025 column is because this is 30% of over 20% were scored 1. It means that in the 2025, fewer than 20% only scored a 1. So they got better performance. That's why those ones that are blank means it was below 20%.
I see.
Almost all of these, however, are also a question they missed on the written. The systems includes things like, how does carburetor heat work? If I give them a scenario, we're flying between these airports, and this all of a sudden I have a complete power failure, like let's say the battery cable fell off. What would you lose? That gets in 91205. That gets into mechanical understanding. They're perfectly okay to open up the POH and look at the electrical diagram, but then it also gets into, okay, are we legal to fly? If it doesn't work, and then in that case, we also talk about, it also covers the ACS element on emergencies. So would you land the airplane now? Would you go to the closest airport, or would you take it back to get it fixed? But you're exactly right, Brian. There is very little, because all airplanes over the last 10 years where these people have been driving, they just run.
Yeah.
We used to spend every Saturday going around all the airplanes and all cars in our driveway and changing oil and fixing stuff. And we don't do that anymore. They just run, and they have nothing to go on. I even had one guy. I was explaining to him how magnetos work. I said, you pull the pull starter on your lawnmower and it runs without any battery. And he had a blank look at the face. I said, wait a minute, you've never cut grass, have you? He said, we have somebody that does that for us.
or an electric mower, or
Yeah.
a key start, or you know.
So, but yeah, you're right. There is very little mechanical knowledge. We're flying 1940s technology in these engines for most of them, and so it has to be taught to them. And again, you taught like you were taught, like that person was taught, and there's a gap there.
So roughly speaking, do you see that people that fail on a written and you get a code, that they come back and they still struggle in the oral with it?
Not all the time, but often that's what the case is.
Okay.
I've got to actually had to send you all. I've got one of the things I sent you. It's a 7-page document that went through common areas of failures, and I've noticed in here several things because I highlighted them. Missed a question the knowledge test. Missed a question the knowledge test. Missed the question the knowledge test. So, just like for example, something not in these lists here, but NTSB 830, right? 3 AK8. It misses often enough that probably 30% of people miss that. And you don't have to know anything. You just have to know how to look it up, right? I mean, when are you ever going to need to have memorized whether you're report something in NTSB? Because the first call I ever got from our school owner when one of our airplanes ended up in a field because they ran out of gas, he said, do I have to report this? I said, hang on. I pulled the side of the road and I went down, pulled it up on my phone and went, nope, you don't have to report that. So using their resources, that becomes more important each check ride. At the private levels, but at least they need to know where to look for stuff. And I even tell them, look, if you don't even know where it is, you think that there's a regulation that covers it or something else, you can even use Google to find the regulation. Don't trust what Google says the regulation is. Go to your FAR AIM and see what it says. So, but a lot of that has to do with them having missed questions and then not being properly covered. Again, we get back to the discussion in the previous episode about CFIs. Right.
Well, I've got to say that if you're seeing people struggle with things they struggle with on the written, that actually says that the written is accurate, which
sure.
I felt it isn't. I felt like there are trick questions and I would miss something that I'm not actually struggling with. But this says that the FAA written test is actually
this doesn't because they probably don't remember the question because they weren't allowed to review it. This is just the area.
Right.
So this is not a judgment on
for sure
how good the written is. And I agree. I think that there are a lot of questions on there that somebody said, okay, how can I trick somebody with this? But this is the area. And if the area is missed, then at least, for example, if it said NTSB, then at least they should pull up. It's only a 4-page document. And they should say, hey, put this in your book and take it with you to the check ride.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Ron, we wanted to ask you, radio communications, navigation systems, and facilities show a fail on your 2023 scorecard. How much of that is actual knowledge gaps versus applicants freezing under pressure when you ask them to demonstrate something live? Do you often get the deer in headlight looks from your applicants, like you did with me on a couple of them?
And where are you looking at that on?
It was 2023.
Oh, that's not on this sheet. So this sheet's
Brian
24
pulled
and
this
25.
data out.
I may have sent you the sheet. I think I sent you a sheet earlier. And which one is it? What does it say?
I'm gonna pull it up here.
So how about this, Ron? You see a lot of people struggling in check rides with radio communications, navigation systems, and how to navigate airports, hot spots, all the other things that people can potentially do on the ground that are problematic. So just how much in your experience do you feel that's just an experiential or training gap, or is it just people freezing under pressure? Because I don't like pressure. I don't feel like I bring my best self to a check ride.
I do not have, I rarely have anybody that struggles with the actual radio work, but most of my check rides are from a non-towered airport, and our diversion airport's a non-towered airport. And if it's at a towered airport where I'll go to towered airports and do check rides like Greensboro, Greenville, whatever, and they are used to it already. So I don't never have had an issue with the person in the flight part struggling with the actual communications.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did have one guy that when we diverted him, he diverted him to a towered airport with parallel runways. He had never been to that airport, nor had he ever been to parallel runways. And apparently he also had never been to a towered airport, period. Because I could look at their cross countries and see.
Yeah.
And it was pretty entertaining for him to go in there. The girl said that he was Stanley County is a training field for the National Guard controllers. So you have 4 people on the radio, instructor and a pilot in the airplane, instructor and a pilot on the ground. And she said, report in the Delta because they don't have radar. Expect a right. No, she said, report in the Delta. That's all she said. So then about 30 seconds later, he goes in and says, November 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to cross over midfield, enter a downwind for 2-2 left. And I said, no. He said, what do you mean no? I said, you don't tell them what to do. They tell you what to do. So she then said, because she's a trainee, she came back ready and said, okay. And I could just see her flipping pages in the 7110.65. You heard the voice come on. Her instructor in the tower said, November 1, 2, 3, 4, report to right base for 2-2 left. And she said, what does he mean by right base, and why is he saying 2-2 left? So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, people who have never been to airports that they're going to fly by and might do diversion is usually not a good idea. But over a lot of things, if you look on our chart, we had it talked about items that were failed, and on that flight part, not performed very well. One of them is tune ID and track the VOR, because we have them do that under the hood.
Right.
It was 50% last year, 30% scored marginal, and that's completely unfamiliarity with how to do the VOR on the particular GPS Navcom they've got, and it's because they were shown it last week. They never flew VORs on any cross country, and nobody ever told them until the week before check ride prep. And I have several, more than we have time for, humorous stories about where we would have ended. I even told one guy, I said, look, you can go the way we're going. He was going the opposite direction. I said, we'll get to the VOR, but we have to go all the way around the world to come in, and we don't have enough fuel to do that. So, yeah, but a lot of them, the instructors do not teach them. They've never done VOR navigation. Instrument never done VOR navigation, never intercepted a radio, none of that stuff. I've got a guy coming next week or 2 weeks from now for a private, and the airplane doesn't have a VOR in it. So the instructor wrote to me, good idea. Hey, what can we do? I said, well, he can use his GPS or his iPad, but he's going to be asked to intercept a radio. I'll say, okay, fly 090, intercept the 360 radio, and fly it down to the VOR. And he said, we'll change airplanes. So
I want to hit Nathan's question. I
Okay.
kind of want to rephrase it. Nathan, who was my instructor for my commercials, so you can blame him for all my faults. What does Ron think about the private or instrument check ride and how much it actually prepares a pilot for real world flying? Maybe rephrase it. What tweaks, or maybe it's fine the way it is, but if you could change anything about the private or the instrument to maybe take one step closer to preparing pilots for the real world, what do you think?
I think if it's done the right way, if just like VOR navigation, right? If somebody teaches some better along the way, because we may end up having to use it. I mean, GPS may go out. Yeah, there's some stuff. I try to on my check rides. I try to leave off the things that I don't think relate to practical flying.
Gotcha.
Just like the question I told you about people missing or not knowing about following a VFR flight plan. I know very well that people will probably never ever file a VFR flight plan in their entire life. I will hardly ever even bring that question up unless they missed it on the written, and I'll have to ask. I'm required to ask them about it. But overall, I think depends upon the DPE and how well it's structured. But I try to make mine as if this was a real flight we were taking for a cross country, as if it was a real diversion. And for the instrument, I certainly think that I will try to put them in situations like I make sure I'm giving them vectors to final on one instrument approach. I make sure they're required to have course reversal on that kind of thing. So the ACS gives some of those answers, and then I try to put the rest of them in based upon my experience. As any CFI will tell you, I'm sure Nathan will say the same thing, being a CFI makes you a far better pilot. And then I found when I became a DPE, I realized, oh, now I understand how I should have been teaching, because I see the people that are really well prepared and I see the people that are not. And I say, okay, that's why one of the questions that I have when I do CFI check rides is, tell me about the instructors you had. And even looking back, at the time, you might not even known they were good or bad, but tell me some of the things they did that were good and some things that were bad that you're going to either emulate or avoid as you're going to be a CFI. So I think overall, if certainly if you gave every single thing that was in there, a lot of it's like, why would you ever ask that question or ever ask the pilot to do that? A good example of those actually is commercial, right? I mean, commercial maneuvers, power off 180 is obviously the most failed private and commercial pilot task, no question about that. And so, how could we change that? I mean, Seth Lake's got a great idea. I was listening to his podcast the other day that, hey, maybe you at least get, maybe or I think Jason Miller says, well, how about the first third of the runway instead of 200 feet? Because you're really preparing for an emergency landing.
Right.
Or maybe the first third of the first 2,000 feet, right? As if you're going into a field. And Seth says, well, how about if I give you one do-over on that? So I think there's some of that you could tweak it for that, but overall, I think it's reasonably well. And I mean, the main thing is you've got the list already. If you can get all the gooch, gouts, whatever you have for all mine. I've got one people sent to me, and I'll send to you that tells what happened. But the ACS is really what we can do.
Yeah.
So
there are things in there I wish that, for example, let's talk about private. Private, we don't test touch and goes, right? But that's a very commonly messed up item. Bent metal and touch and goes. What is the way most instrument flights? What kind of approach do most instrument flights terminate with?
Missed.
What kind of instrument approach what does the controller usually tell you as you approach the airport? Almost always, not all the time, but
you mean in real life, visual approach?
In real life flying.
You mean visual approach?
The visual, yeah.
Yeah.
Guess what's not on the check ride?
Right.
Visual approach.
A visual. I helped do a 709 ride for a guy, and he went into Charlotte in his Cirrus, and they said, what can you give us to the final approach? He said, I'll give you 160. And he did, and he never got it slowed down and departed the runway. He said, you'd be surprised how many people come out of a place like Charlotte to help you once you run off the runway. So we had to go and practice doing that, but that was not anywhere in. I'm not allowed to test that on an instrument check ride.
Yeah.
Great question.
Wild. Yeah. So we've got about maybe 20 minutes here left, and I want to make sure that we get to this last part of this. A couple things I would love to hear you elaborate on for us, Ron. And thanks, by the way, so much for doing this. It's just been amazing. I would love for a lot of this last portion of this episode to be, it's rare that you have access to a DPE where you can demystify the check ride and get the actual information and all of that. But I think that while we're talking about a lot of particulars, maneuvers, and various outcomes, what do you think is something that, you hear some basic things from people, but if you could tell every student, and you do mention this in your the book, which is a fantastic document of preparedness that any student or prospective check ride haver would be thrilled to have. I loved it. But what do you think is one thing a student can do the night before check ride, or what preparatory mental or physical advice would you offer someone who's up for a check ride?
All right. So first of all, let me comment on Rich Files' comment. I thought private pilots had to have controlled airport time. Nobody has to have controlled airport time. You can get all. Here's the sad part about the way this thing. You can get all the way to your 1,500 hours to go to the airlines without ever having gone by yourself. Now you have to have three takeoff lands to control field.
Okay.
Dual. I mean solo, but that a lot of times the instructor will fly there, get out of the airplane, they do the 3 takeoff landings. You can never have gone to a private pilot to a control field by yourself, never having flown a complex airplane by yourself, never having flown a retractable gear airplane by yourself. So, and be an airline pilot.
Now,
Okay,
by the way,
I
some of the reasons
digress.
that
So your question there. So the night before, it's actually one of the lines in my thing, and I said, okay. So what you need to do is plan your weather. You've been looking at weather for weeks before your check ride. I mean, especially I've got these guys coming. I handled 5 text message emails today about I'm not sure about the weather, and one guy was asking about the weather 9 days from now. I said, why don't we wait a little closer? But I said, if you want to move it, that's fine with me. But anyway, the point is, now the night before, look at your weather. You don't have different DPs are different, but in my case, I don't care that you know what the weather is going to be when we actually take, because normally they'll plan the flight for say at noon that day, and the night before it's more than more than 11 hours, so you can't get the stuff on aviation.gov. Just plan it for some time that you can get weather for. Okay. Plan it for 10 o'clock that night. I don't care. I'm interested in the process that you know how to do these things, not the actual results. Because when we get ready to go flying, you're going to have numbers for your checkpoints, how many minutes they're going to take. Well, when we get ready to go flying, one thing we do is we're going to take a break so I can eat my snack because I'm an old guy, I need food before we go flying. And you'll then have a time to go look at weather. You can pull up a before flight or wherever, you can call the briefer, I don't care, and revise your times if you want to. So do that early, like by 6 or 7 o'clock, and then get a good night's rest. I had one of my guys, I was sitting in for a check ride, and he sends me a question at midnight, the night before his check ride. He said, I'm asking about that. I said, Dennis, if you're not ready now, just go to bed. I did answer his question. Yeah, so that's the main thing is you can do a lot. You can plan your cross-country flight a week ahead of time. You can pick your checkpoints out, get all that stuff done, and then the night before, look at your weather, do all that stuff, call the briefer, do whatever you can do, and then go to bed. Next morning, get up, maybe call the briefer again, or maybe just look at weather again, and you write it down, and you're going there. So, anyway.
I want to make a quick comment. The books that you get when you sign up for Ron for a check ride, and we've actually done an entire podcast on binders for check ride prep. And Ron lays it all out for you perfectly in his book. You'll have 3 tabs: the plane, the pilot, the flight, and which is kind of how we have all built our binders. But I just wanted it really resonated with us because all of us have our different check ride binders for the different ones we've done. And it's like you said, it's all laid out there in front of you. And I was one of those guys that's panicking, the day before my instrument flight, and I'm texting the DPE, 20 times. But after you've done it a couple of times, to your point, Ron, it's
and that book is not just
done with it. Right.
That book, because if you show up as one guy did last week, and he had all of his information in several sheets of paper in a folder, and he went through them every single time I asked him anything. It's not just that he's trying to find the information, it's that he's getting nervous that entire time.
Right. Yeah.
As opposed to 2 or 3 of my young ladies I have who are way more organized than we are. I asked them a question, they go to the proper tab, which was color-coded for them, of course, flipped it open, and there's the answer. So having that in there, but it's not a book you put together the night before. It's actually a book your instructor should work with you to start working on in the weeks up as you're, those last times when you're preparing for the check ride.
I had to split the difference because my instructor very much is against tabbed far aims and all of that, and really wants you to be comfortable and finding everything just as you need it. And I kind of split the difference on that for mine.
Well, I went to my CFI back then we did with the FAA, and I had my PHAC, and it must have had 100 tabs. I couldn't have found anything. So I have no problem with tabs. When somebody shows up with a pre-tabbed book, because you can buy them now with the tabs already in there.
Oh, yeah.
That is usually a bad sign because they didn't put them in there themselves. They put, in your case, because I watched you use your book, and it was obvious to me, number one, by how quickly you found things and how familiar you were, that you would put those tabs because those things were important to you.
Yes.
Right? There's nothing at all wrong with that. If you show up with every single that's just like an outside table of contents.
You could tell mine was not something you could buy because you couldn't even read the handwriting that was on the tabs.
I figured you had your own code.
Yeah.
Well, so
and
now
having your own tabs is key because that is you going to the things that you need help remembering instead of putting those tabs on that you can buy, which doesn't gain anything.
Right.
And let me throw one thing in here that really kind of comes before all of that, and that is that about a third of my check rides would not even start if I didn't send information ahead of time to check on documents and endorsements.
Yeah.
The first, middle, and last, and suffix, if any, have to match on your photo ID, usually a passport or a driver's license, your IACRA, your student pilot commercial, whatever the certificate you already have, your knowledge test report, and your medical. Generally, it's the medical. Most people have a missing middle name or a middle initial or something. All of those, if the names don't match, they can be fixed, but they can't be fixed the morning of the check ride. And if you show up and one of those doesn't match, you haven't failed. You just have to go back home. You don't get to start. And the same thing happens with your endorsements. If you don't have your endorsements there and your instructor cannot be reached, because very few instructors ever come to a check ride, I wish they did, but they don't, then we cannot start the check ride until you find that instructor and get the endorsements. So that's why I tell them CFIs when I'm teaching, doing check rides or teaching you CFIs, when you get a new student, you need to check their logbook for the past endorsements. And you need to check all their documents to make sure that they have all that stuff matching well before check ride day.
Yeah, and I think that, and you tell me if this is too much of an expectation, but I think it's hard when you're at a flight school, especially for your private, and you don't even have access to the logs necessarily until you can ask for them and get them. And, there's this kind of barrier between you and the plane. Whereas as an owner, you are very well familiar with all of these things because you're already mired in airworthiness and all of
you're talking about maintenance logs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sorry.
So our policy at our school, from me having people who, listen, your students, once you become a CFI, your students will drop dime on you. They will tell on you to the DPE, right? And so they would show up and they had no idea. I would say, okay, I'd send them the form. I send the maintenance form. I said to you guys, right, here's all the inspections. That's just to help the memory of the person, kind of like it's part of the book in there, right? So they had that perfectly filled. I said, okay, well, show me that entry. And they would pull open the maintenance book and start flipping from the first page when the most recent entries are in the back.
Right.
And so it was, and I said, how often have you looked at this? He said, we covered it yesterday.
You're like, we're in the Nixon administration. Can we move this along, please?
So our policy is that the instructor should cover those maintenance documents with the student before their first solo, again, before their first solo cross country. And then by the time you get the check ride, they're familiar with it. But that you're right. That is a weak area, Brian. A lot of people don't do that. And matter of fact, last week I could not start the flight part of a CFI check ride because the guy didn't have his flight manual supplement for the 430 in the airplane. You have to have flight manual supplements and the pilot reference guides so you know where the air messages are. If you don't have those, the airplane's not airworthy. We can't start the check ride.
That's right. And so I think that even if you can do this at the private level, but certainly I think once you get to instrument and definitely for commercial, that you need to be putting yourself in the mindset of the DPE and backwards, right? About you qualifying yourself, because that's what's required as a professional, or as you get advanced in your ratings, you need to be owning those things so that when somebody asks you for those things, you are well ahead of the curve because you are so aware of what is required to be airworthy and to be illegal.
For commercial, just like we talked about, for commercial, you're a commercial pilot, you will probably, because I did pilot service for a family with their 206 for 10 years, a wonderful airplane, but I was responsible for all of that. So if you're a commercial, you need to show up the check ride as if you are actually managing that airplane, and therefore you need to be familiar with it. When do these results do? When that kind of stuff do? All that type thing is done. Certainly expect a higher level. And then again, the other problem we talked about, because you don't have to fly a complex airplane, you don't have to fly a retractable gear airplane, but you don't have to. So therefore, we're going to talk about systems. Remember an idea of systems for how does retractable gear work and how does constant speed prop work? Because you can now, I got a guy that's taking his commercial, called me for his commercial check ride in the Pipistrel, in the 150. And, you wouldn't think that'd be a commercial airplane, but it's completely legal. Yeah. I didn't have to worry about doing me because I can't fit in a 150 anymore. I sold it in one, but that was 10 gallons of avgas to go weight wise.
So what's a check ride moment that stuck with you, or where an applicant maybe surprised you one way or the other?
Well, I guess the most, the most gratifying, well, I have a lot of the gratifying ones, but I've had one perfect check ride. Tell all the candidates about it. Sophie, she had finished her freshman year at Auburn. She complained about how hard they were on her. They must have made her a better pilot. The entire ground part, the entire flight part, she hadn't missed a thing. Her dad comes in 6 weeks later. They're running the flight at the same time. I said, Todd, are you as good as Sophie? He said, no, and he wasn't, but he still passed. Because we don't have to, perfection not the standard, the ACS the standard. But I've done check rides for people on their 17th birthday, private check rides. I've done, the guy that did the one that was 32 years, that was very gratifying for him to finish that and see that. So it really kind of depends upon their journey there. That's the ones that I really have enjoyed the most. The ones I enjoy the most are the ones who are well prepared and I don't have to fail them. I hate failing people.
So you kind of prefer check rides that aren't remarkable?
Yes, it's a lot of stuff to do. Certainly, I mean, certainly as you get up into especially in the CFI, like that's why the ground salon we talk about a lot. But it's a lot of thing to do. But then, you kind of know what's coming. If you should be able to find somebody that's been with the DP before. There's plenty of records out on my stuff. You should be able to look at the ACS and figure that out. And there's all kinds of forums. Elliot, as a matter of fact, EC stumbled across the thing on one of the forums, said, I've got a check ride with Ron Horton. Does anybody know that? And somebody had written in, he sent it to me and said, oh, you mean Horton? You have to memorize every regulation, memorized everywhere. So I took Wendy, my lovely bride, Wendy loves Elliot. I said, look here what Elliot found. She said, Horton. They're going to be sorry when I get through them. They'll think it was Horton. So your reputation may precede you. I don't know. But then again, you don't have to come to me. But
important.
I try to make an experience that I'm not supposed to teach, right? But it can still be experience where we learn, even though we're talking about stuff you've already done. So.
Well, listen, Ron, Ben's going to wrap us up here in a second, but I wanted to bring up one last quick thing, which is I find that every check ride that I've had, there's been kind of one phrase or one thing that the examiner said that really stuck with me. I mean, of course, there's a tapestry of lessons and learning in all of that experience, but I've found that there's almost like catchphrases that I kind of walk away from for each check ride. Funny enough, my instrument check ride, the catchphrase that I walked away with is, "Who's your daddy?" Because he was just saying, ATC, like, who's your daddy? You just do whatever they say. It's just this whole thing about who's your daddy. And I just thought that was kind of hilarious and it stuck in my brain. Now with you, Ron, the phrase that stuck in my brain after.
Hey, wait to hear this.
Oh, it's the show title.
It was, what's time to a hog?
Yes.
So can you elaborate on that for everybody before we go?
So the guy I told you about, there was a mentor of mine. He's the one that introduced me to that. And the deal is, it kind of talks about why, because you mentioned this, and I know y'all talk about on the show a lot about how, slow is fast and yada, yada, all that kind of stuff. So the local farmer loads his hogs up and he's taking them to the market to sell them. And he goes down and stops at the local breakfast place, and all the good old boys pull in there and they look at him and say, hey, Bob, I see you got all your hogs there. Where are you taking them? He said, well, I'm taking them down to Burgaw. He said, why are you taking to Burgaw? That's such a long ways away. You could take them down here to Monroe. He said, I get 5 cents more a pound in Burgaw. He said, but it's a 4-hour drive. The guy said, what's time to a hog? So the point is, if we love flying, if we enjoy being in the air, the main thing we need to do is, if you don't want to, you should never fly a fast airplane unless you intend to get a fast airplane, right? Just like, don't get a computer that's fast if you never intend to have a fast computer. But by and large, if you think about the experience we've been given and things of that type, every now and then you remember something because you got there in such a quick time, but generally you remember things that happened along the way. So the point is that if in aviation, time to spare, go by air, what's time to a hog, just take your time. There's very few things that back in the day, wind your watch if something happens. So that's what that means, is just make sure you're taking the time to do things the right way.
I love it.
I love it too, man. And Ron, it's such a great pleasure to have you on with this. Been wanting to do this for a while. Been a big fan of yours for a long time, and we're really glad you joined us tonight.
Well, I'm glad. And the thing I want to say is about this community you guys have built. I don't think I've ever had a check ride where we went to celebrate dinner and two people had flown in from hours away just to be able to have dinner after the check ride.
Yes,
So,
to
and
celebrate.
of course, we all talked about Ted since he wasn't there, but that was a great celebration. That shows what you guys, you three, and all the people over here in this chat side, what you have put together is not just some ordinary podcast. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Very good, Brian. Ted, anything else for the good of the order?
No, thanks all.
All
That's
good.
great.
Thanks, Ron.
You're welcome.
So again, leave us a 5-star review, and as Brian said, as long as there's 5 stars on there, you can pretty much say whatever you want. We'll take it all. Don't forget to subscribe on your app. And tonight, again, kind of with the weather theme, because we've had a lot of rain here in the Southeast. The posters on the walls in Air Force flight ops rooms were right. There is no reason to fly through a thunderstorm in peacetime. Signing off, episode 183 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. Goodbye, everybody.